Behold ye among the heathen, and regard, and wonder marvelously. For I will work a work in your days, which ye will not believe, though it be told you. For lo, I raise up the Chaldeans, that bitter and hasty nation, which shall march through the breadth of the land, to possess the dwelling places that are not theirs. They are terrible and dreadful. Their judgment and their dignity shall proceed of themselves. This is an address to the nation of Australia in regards to the ongoing rumors of war and growing animosity between Australia and China. Many have given their ungodly, fretful opinions and perspectives on the matter, as the nation hopes for peace, stability, and safety to be the final outcome of this conflict. Nevertheless, God desires to give biblical vent through His word on the matter that is of the utmost importance to hear and consider. Dear fellow Australians, as most of you are aware, the tensions between Australia and China have grown exponentially in the past year. It is very clear to all that Australia is on the brink of war with the mighty communist superpower China. China has built military bases in the region, launched cyber attacks, and only in the past few months erected a consulate base in Adelaide. They have even the last week threatened Australia with a full-scale war if they interfere with Taiwan. The government's response to this all has been to hurriedly pour money into its defense force in an effort to prepare for war, while many citizens of Australia are anxious of how this will all play itself out. Australia is ready to fight on to the death to keep their sovereignty as a nation, but will this effort prosper? Is China indeed God's rod to a government divided, a nation defiled by vile affections, and professing Christians who scorn the God of judgment and truth? Indeed, dear friends, it is. Such lewdness is in the four walls of most churches in the land that merits such a scourge upon the proud land of Australia. Australia is not so much fighting against China as they are the rod of God, which God has formed for a purpose of His own glory in the last days. God has risen up China to fight against and judge Australia. Thus saith the Lord God of Israel, Behold, I will turn back the weapons of war that are in your hands, wherewith ye fight against the king of Babylon, and against the Chaldeans, which besiege you without the walls, and I will assemble them into the midst of the city. And I myself will fight against you with an outstretched hand and with a strong arm, even in anger and in fury and in great wrath. God, dear viewer, is pleased throughout biblical history and still today to use the most barbaric, brutish, wicked army among the heathen to judge a people who He has striven with, that He has sent holy prophets unto. Rich Western nations like Australia have chosen their nationalistic pride and love of themselves more than a sincere, devoted love of the cross of Christ. This merits the strange work of the Chaldeans, or China, that will blossom into God's army of several other nations in the last days. God will use the rod of men to humble the lofty, stout-hearted looks and heart of all men. Can you believe it? It was unbelievable even to the prophet Habakkuk at the first. God, using an army of evildoers to judge His people and the nations proportionately that wrongly influences people. The Aussie pride of this land is a cause for China to be God's rod now, and Babylon furthermore in the near future. Weep and howl now, dear friends, for the distress and miseries that shall not many days hence befall this land. Australia for many years has prospered and become a very wealthy land. However, God has looked on long enough and has raised up China to chastise the heathen and compromise church systems of Australia specifically. The day of the Lord is at hand. If the threats of war do not bring a godly fear to this land, then the threat of war will be real war that will be decreed from the God of all the earth and the King of all nations. Blow ye the trumpet in Zion, and sound an alarm in my holy mountain. Let all the inhabitants of the land tremble, for the day of the Lord cometh, for it is nigh at hand, a day of darkness and of gloominess, a day of clouds and of thick darkness, as the morning spread upon the mountains, a great people and a strong. There hath not been ever the like, neither shall be any more after it, even to the years of many generations. A fire devoureth before them, and behind them a flame burneth. The land is as the garden of Eden before them, and behind them a desolate wilderness, yea, and nothing shall escape them. God's rod historically in the Bible was known to be Assyria toward Israel and Judah for their unrepentant sins. History repeats itself, as God always has had an army waiting for a stubborn and hard-hearted people that refuse to bow in submission to his word spoken by the prophets. We do not know for certain what role China will play in the rise of Babylon in the last days, but they will certainly play even a key role. God has prospered China for many years militarily and technologically to overthrow islands like Australia by war and conquest. When God is angry with a nation, he raises up an oppressive and cruel nation to judge them in his wrath. This you can see with the army of Assyria that God called the rod of his anger. O Assyrian, the rod of mine anger, and the staff in their hand is mine indignation. I will send him against an hypocritical nation, and against the people of my wrath will I give him a charge, to take the spoil, and to take the prey, and to tread them down like the mire of the streets. Habakkuk the prophet calls this work a strange work, God using an army to get the attention of a sinful people that slacks his law and hates biblical judgment. God has an answer for all those that scorn his judgments now in Australia, and this answer is China, and after that, Mystery Babylon the Great. A strange work indeed that many will refuse to believe is so. Yes, the heathen and even Christians are this sinful, and God is this holy, that such a strange work is ripe to be brought forth in real time in the earth as I speak. Peter Dutton, the Minister for Defense in Australia, claims that Australia will never relinquish its sovereignty as a nation. But I declare to you this day, my friends, that China will be used under God as a rod to take away Australia's sovereignty as a nation. Australia cannot and will not escape the judgments of God, be it the COVID-19 pestilence that is moving through the nations of the earth, killing an untold number, or through war. These judgments are inescapable toward this land of Australia that will be brought soon to its knees. The defenses of Australia, though courageous they may be, will depart from them, as God's rod through China at present will be provoked to action in war and in wrath soon enough. Australia hopes to find refuge in other nations like America, hoping that they will come to their aid if war breaks out. However, according to God's holy word, we find that God, in the times of tribulation, always took the sword out of one nation's hands and strengthened the arms of his sword that he put in Babylon's hands. Therefore thus saith the Lord God, Behold, I am against Pharaoh king of Egypt, and will break his arms, the strong, and that which was broken. I will cause the sword to fall out of his hand, and I will scatter the Egyptians among the nations, and will disperse them through the countries. And I will strengthen the arms of the king of Babylon, and put my sword in his hand. But I will break Pharaoh's arms, and he shall groan before him with the groanings of a deadly wounded man. But I will strengthen the arms of the king of Babylon, and the arms of Pharaoh shall fall down, and they shall know that I am the Lord, when I shall put my sword into the hand of the king of Babylon, and he shall stretch it out upon the land of Egypt. As seen in the Old Testament, Egypt was a nation that many looked to and went down to for help in time of conflict with God's rod. God wills to warn Australia, which firmly trusts and looks to their Western allies like America for help in the case of a possible war with China. Woe to them that go down to Egypt for help, and stay on horses, and trust in chariots because they are many, and in horsemen because they are very strong. But they look not unto the Holy One of Israel, neither seek the Lord. Yet he also is wise, and will bring evil, and will not call back his words, but will arise against the house of evildoers, and against the help of them that work iniquity. Now the Egyptians are men, and not God, and their horses flesh, and not spirit. When the Lord shall stretch out his hand, both he that helpeth shall fall, and he that is holpen shall fall down, and they all shall fail together. There is a reason the prophet Habakkuk calls this a strange work of God. The carnally minded and greatest intellectuals of our day cannot seem to wrap their brains around such a thing as this. This is a stumbling block to all pride and worldly wisdom in this generation. The name Habakkuk means one who embraces. The prophet here found insightful and supernatural revelation of God's ordainment of the Chaldeans coming for war with the sinful Jews historically. You must as well, dear friends, soon find the same method of embracing certain judgment that can no longer linger in Australia for the sins of the church and the nation that Christians and atheists alike refuse to blush and weep about. China, in its communist regime, will be a small taste of God's great army that will be unstoppable, that not one nation can physically make war against and defeat it. Why, you may ask? This is because it will be God's army. The rod of God through China will prepare the way for the army of God through Mystery Babylon the Great. The end of all things is at hand, dear friends. May you soberly consider with fear and trembling the judgments of God hovering over this land, ready to burst forth for all to see, that are sent by Jesus Christ himself. In wrath, may God remember mercy.